Spooktober's here, and with every dusk, Eerie Instance unveils a new tale. 31 days, 31 stories. Hit subscribe and journey into the unknown with us.
The incessant patter of rain against my apartment window was almost comforting. A familiar sound in this ever-bustling city. My fingers danced across the laptop keyboard, attempting to mold my latest findings into a coherent article. The phone's shrill ring cut through the rhythm of my typing. I reached for it, eyebrows raised at the unfamiliar number. Probably another unsolicited sales call. Hello? Instead of a voice, I heard only my own breathing echoed back at me, strangely distorted, as if through a tunnel. A moment later, a whisper, so faint it was almost drowned out by the city's distant sounds. It was my own voice, but I couldn't make out the words. I pulled the phone away, staring at the screen. The call was still connected. "Who is this?" I demanded, my initial confusion now laced with irritation. But the line went dead. Shaking my head, I placed the phone back on the table, chiding myself for being spooked by what was probably a technical glitch. I'd been diving too deep into urban myths for my recent articles, and it was playing tricks on my mind. My focus returned to the article, but it wasn't long before the phone's ring startled me again. The same unknown number. Hesitating for just a moment, I swiped to answer. This time, in the thick silence, I discerned the distant sound of sirens, followed by a soft cry. My own voice, tinged with despair. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "This isn't funny," I snapped, hoping my voice sounded more confident than I felt. But again, the call ended abruptly. Sleep eluded me that night. The strangeness of the calls, the unmistakable familiarity of my own voice, it all twirled in my mind, forming a tapestry of unease. The following day, over coffee, I recounted the eerie experience to Maya, my closest confidante. Her laughter, bright and untamed, echoed in the quaint cafe. "A call from your future self? Maybe you're warning yourself about bad coffee choices," she joked, pointing to my almost untouched mug. I smirked, playing along. Or maybe future me is just really bored. We both chuckled, but beneath my lightheartedness was a gnawing concern. The calls felt too real, too personal to be a mere prank. Maya must have caught on to my lingering unease because her demeanor softened. "Hey," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "It's probably just a weird glitch or a prankster with sound editing skills. Don't overthink it." I nodded, wanting to believe her, but the weight in my chest remained. Little did I know that these unsettling calls were just the beginning, and they were about to take a turn from merely eerie to downright horrifying. A week passed with no more mysterious calls. The relief, though, was short-lived. On a quiet evening, while I was catching up on some much-delayed reading, my phone buzzed to life. The unknown number again. My heart raced. Hesitating briefly, I answered, pressing record on another device. If this was some sick prank, I wanted evidence. Through the static, I heard the faint noise of a train station announcement. Chilled, I recognized it immediately. It was the local station I use daily. The announcement was interrupted by a desperate scream. My scream. It cut off as abruptly as it started, leaving a ringing silence. I was breathless, fingers gripping the phone so tightly they turned white. The specificness of the location, the raw fear in that scream, it was too much to be mere coincidence. I felt like a pawn in a cruel game, each move pushing me closer to an unseen but impending doom. Determined to confront this head-on, I decided to visit the station the next day, at the same time the call seemed to imply. Maya, always the voice of reason, was against it. "You're playing into someone's game," she warned. But seeing the resolve in my eyes, she sighed, relenting. "Fine, but I'm coming with you." As the hours ticked by, my apprehension grew. By the time we arrived at the station, my palms were sweaty, and my throat was parched. The familiar hum of the crowd and the metallic scent of the tracks felt oddly alien. Every shuffle and murmur made me jump. We positioned ourselves near the exit, a strategic vantage point. Hours seemed to pass. The station gradually emptied as the evening wore on. Just as I began to think that we had been duped, a commotion caught our attention. A man, face obscured by a hood, was wrestling with a commuter over a bag. Before we could react, in his attempt to flee, he shoved a figure standing too close to the edge. Maya. The world slowed. Her shocked face, the gasping crowd, the blinding lights of the oncoming train, it was a montage of horror I'd never forget. I ran forward, a desperate cry tearing from my lips. But I was too late. The deafening sound of the train drowned out everything else. Tears blurred my vision. I crumpled to the ground, the weight of the tragedy pressing down on me. The reality was suffocating. Maya was gone, and I had unwittingly led her to this fate. The cold, hard platform under me, the distant cries, and the haunting echo of that dreadful call were all I knew. The line between reality and nightmare had blurred, and there was no waking up from this horror. The torrential rain against my window became the soundtrack to my sorrow. My apartment, which once echoed with laughter and late-night conversations, now stood silent, a constant reminder of the void Maya's absence had left. The city lights outside seemed duller, casting feeble glimmers on wet pavements, reflecting my own despair. One evening, as I tried to drown out the pain with a bottle of wine, my phone buzzed again. I felt my heart freeze. The same unknown number. A mix of anger, fear, and grief surged within me. Taking a deep breath, I answered, bracing myself for whatever was to come. This time, it was the soft patter of rain, so similar to what I heard outside. Then, a distant lullaby played, one I remembered from childhood. And finally, the sound of sobbing, my own sobbing. The call was shorter than before, but felt like an eternity. The emotional intensity, the raw pain, it was all too real, too close to my current state. I dropped the phone, its screen cracking on impact. But it wasn't the phone I was trying to escape from. It was the relentless grip of guilt and grief. Each call, each echo from the future, or some twisted, alternate reality, only served as a cruel reminder of my failure. Days merged into nights. The calls became more frequent, each one bringing with it another piece of my fractured psyche. Friends tried to reach out, but their voices seemed distant, muffled. Their concern, their attempts to comfort, were lost in the cacophony of my internal torment. The only constant was the rain. It seemed as if the skies mourned with me, showering the city in a deluge of tears. On one particularly stormy night, as I sat by the window watching the raindrops race down the glass, the haunting lullaby from the call drifted in. It was coming from the apartment next door, a soft, melancholic tune that tugged at memories buried deep within. The juxtaposition of the lullaby and the tempest outside created an eerie harmony, amplifying my sense of isolation and despair. The calls, the rain, the lullaby, they all seemed to be converging, leading me to some inexorable end. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone, scrolling through the missed calls, the voicemails, and the recordings. Each one was a testament to the spiral of events that had led to Maya's tragic end. And then, another call. This time, I didn't wait for the eerie familiarity of sounds. "What do you want?" I cried out, desperation evident in my voice. But there was no answer, only the continued sobbing that mirrored my own. The realization hit me hard. These weren't warnings or messages from the future. They were echoes, resonances of pain and guilt that transcended time. I was trapped in a loop of my own making, unable to escape the haunting reverberations of that tragic day. The story of the calls, Maya's death, and my descent into despair was one that wouldn't find closure. And as the rain continued its relentless pour and the lullaby played on, I was consumed by the overwhelming weight of my sorrow, forever tormented by the echoes from tomorrow.